Hi, everybody. I'm Corey from Athlete Era, and today we're going to be discussing a really interesting topic. We're going to be going through the importance of incorporating new drills and progression into your practice plan. So to discuss this topic today, I'm joined by Lucas Moe. Lucas, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and discuss this with us today. So, Lucas, you've been coaching volleyball for 18 years, and you currently coach a competitive club team, both men's and women's, in Seattle, Washington. So a ton of experience coaching. You've played volleyball all your life, and I know when we originally connected, this topic was really something important to you. You know, you really emphasize being able to incorporate new drills and progressions into your practice plans when you're working with athletes. So, really excited to dive into that topic over the next 15 minutes and explore it in a little bit more detail. So I guess to kick it off in terms of a first question, so many coaches, a lot of times when we talk to them, they might have, 5-10 staple drills. And I think that's a good starting point. But, like we talked about before, sometimes you have to kind of incorporate new drills and progression. So why do you think that concept is really important when it comes to delivering quality coaching?
Yeah, so I think the premise of why I like to incorporate new drills is because I wholeheartedly believe that people are dynamic in nature. We're not static beings. And so as coaches, if we are doing our job well, then our players should be improving. The skill set should be improving, the acumen and the knowledge of the game should also be improving. And if we stick to the same drills, then we're essentially looking at creating repeat habits, essentially, and not really challenging the critical thinking skills that happens in game situations and in game context. And so I think finding new drills, giving different things to look at when they're on the court in practices translates well into what we see in the game situation, where they're looking at different situations and setups and learning and identifying what it is that they should be looking for and how to react to what is happening. And I think when we incorporate new drills into that, the players are able to see the dynamic nature of the sport itself. And so that they understand like what to look for and how to react and respond.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess trying to also more so kind of mirror various types of game situations. So, you don't get into that habit of just going through kind of status quo behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then, one challenge as well, like kind of like we were talking about prior to this meeting, coaches are busy. There's lots going on. So is there a particular time of year you kind of go out and look for new drills or new concepts that you could incorporate within your coaching? Or is it just kind of, when I feel like maybe practices are getting stagnant or, we need to switch things up, that's when you look for it?
It's kind of a hybrid. So like I am one of those coaches that also has like a set of foundational drills that I like to incorporate and lead off with and kind of use it as a baseline to gauge where the players are at. But if I'm being honest, like I'm looking at new drills and new drill concepts like all the time. And most of the time it's happening when I'm not actively searching for it. So what I mean by that is like I'm scrolling through Instagram or TikTok and I see different content creators sharing the different drills that they have. And I'm just looking at it, I was like, oh, like this is definitely something that like my players need to be working on. And I love how they teach it and I love what the drill focuses on. And so I'll try to incorporate that into my next practice or the practice after that. But for the most part, it's really just like on my downtime when I'm just relaxing and just like just mindlessly scrolling through like any of the social medias. I'm like, oh, that looks like a pretty cool drill. Like, let me use that one on the next one. And then like there are times where, because volleyball and like even coaching, I think coaching any sport, the coaching aspect is a very small world. And so you run into people all the time and other coaches. And so like you build that network. And so I'll talk with the other coaches I've run into and like, hey, like, yeah, like my players struggle with this. Like, what are some drills that you have done? And so I build that network of coaches with me. And so we try to figure out other drills that we can incorporate. And then likewise, there are other coaches, like newer coaches who are asking me for like, how do you coach this? And so I'll give them a drill that we can do. And then depending on the age group, I'll say like you can modify it this way so it makes sense for them, and so it's easier for them to focus on certain skill development. So I mean, I think it's very much like networking. Like there's always a way to network if you're being intentional about it and building that network. And then again, like just the scrolling throughout the different social medias that are out there, it just makes it easy to do. Like I love social media these days. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, but it makes it so easier to find content on different things. And like I follow a number of different content creators, different clubs and organizations, and I look at what they do and like, oh, I really like that concept. Like, let me work it into mine and figure out how we can make it work for what we need it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting. I think the concept of using, social media and being purposeful in terms of, following and looking to those people that produce that type of content is quite an interesting thing, because I think that's kind of a newly emerging trend, right? With how popular kind of like short form video content is getting in reels and those sorts of things. It's like, you can utilize those mediums to basically constantly get new ideas now as a coach, which I think is kind of a powerful thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like you said, it can just kind of fit in with what you're already doing. So, you don't feel like going out and finding new content is necessarily now just another additional thing, that you have to do. So yeah.
And I've used the content to like help solidify or emphasize like the foundational skill drills that I have as well. And so like, oh, I like how they teach this drill. Like, let me incorporate that into like my fundamental base. So it helps me build that repository and library of skills for the different levels of skill that I'm trying to also develop with the player. So I think it's helpful in that sense as well. Like, it's not just necessarily finding new drills, it's also finding the drills that fit with the concepts of what we're trying to work with, whether it's the fundamental or the progressive aspects.
Yeah, for sure. That's a very good point. And then that kind of actually leads well into another question that I had. But so when you're working with athletes specifically, is there any indicators or things that you look for during practice that really clues you in, and kind of you have that, moment of being like, hey, I need to really progress this, or I might need to now look for a new drill concept in this specific area? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think the ones that stand out the most when like knowing to change up the drills is when there's a lack of intensity in the drill. So I do think that you can do the same drill, but the way you approach the drill determines the effectiveness of the drill, or how the players approach the drill will determine the effectiveness of the drill. But if I'm using the same drills to start out with, I start to notice that rather than being disciplined in the specific technique that we're looking at, they start to get lazy in how they're performing the drill and how they are exemplifying the particular skill that we're looking for. Now, I attribute that primarily to boredom, but also in the sense that they're not being challenged. So a lot of the reasons why I do progressive drills and why I look for new skills is so that they are applying that critical thinking aspect. And so if the drill starts to appear that we've already done this, like, why are we doing this again mentality, I think it's time for a new drill to be introduced to that basically identifies or focuses on the key concepts of that critical thinking aspect. Like, okay, now we're still working on that particular technique that we were working on earlier, but we're doing it in a different setting or in a different situation that really highlights the fact that now you really need to be more cognizant of the technique that you are doing, because it's in a different situation where it's not as controlled as it typically is in the drill that we were doing earlier, but now it's more like game situation based. And so now let's focus on the skill, but we're focusing on how this skill is actually applied in game situation.
Yeah, for sure. And when you flow through practices, I guess, do you kind of like follow a bit of that progression where you try to initially start, I guess, with like more skill focused technical aspects that you want to work on, and then kind of progress to, some of those more like applied type of activities?
Yeah, I have a tendency to do progressive practices or progressive drills, mostly because I think it's helpful in emphasizing and underlying the importance of the skill that we're focusing on. And so when I focus on progressive drills, we're looking at the technique itself, which it's helpful to isolate the technique so that they know what it is that they're focusing on. And so the way I coach and the drills that I do, the players that I work with, it gets to the point where when they make a mistake, they know why the mistake was made and they know how to fix it, which I think is the more important aspect of the drill, which is why I do a lot of the progressive type of drills. And then we move more into like, we go from like partner drills to like group drills and then to like the 6v6 drills where it is that more game situation based where there's a lot more movement and dynamics. And so they need to be more cognizant of it. And so oftentimes in the drills that we're doing, I can say that we just worked on this, like, or we worked on this earlier in the evening. Like, remember, we need to do this with our platform, or we need to do this with our arm motion or our waist when we're torquing. And so there are the different techniques that get highlighted and emphasized in the other drills. And so I think it naturally builds on each other, which is a helpful way to emphasize, like, yes, this is what we've been working on. And like, now you know what it is that you should be looking for and how it is that you need, or what it is that you need to change about your technique to make sure it reaps the benefits that we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And it kind of, I guess, shows really to keep athletes engaged and improving, right? It's that combination of also like not only finding new drills and concepts, but also, making sure that you're progressing your players appropriately throughout the entire duration of the practice. So yeah, I think those are some really good points. And then I think also just as a bit of a wrap up here, just to help other coaches that might be new kind of learn from some of your experiences over the past 18 years. What are one or two kind of important lessons that you've learned as a coach that you think could be a helpful takeaway for others?
Okay. So I think one of the biggest ones that I've learned, and I apply this in a number of aspects of my life, never working harder than my players. And what I mean by that is, as a coach, we can do all that we possibly can to help our players improve. But at the end of the day, our players are the ones who are on the court. And so if our players if they decide that they don't want to be competitive or they don't want to win, as a coach, I can't want them to be competitive. I can't want it more. I can't want that win more than they do, because then it just hurts me more than it does that. And it just builds this perpetual cycle of just downhilling it from there. Which kind of leads into like the second lesson that I've learned is that there is an importance of goal setting amongst players and coaches, but more so shared goal setting. And I've had to do this with a number of the teams that I have. Like, we've had like our coming to Jesus moments where like they didn't do well in a tournament. And then, I've asked them like, what is it that you guys want from this season? And they'll say like, well, we want to be competitive. This is what we want to do. And then I will highlight to them, like, if that is the case, these are the things that need to happen. And so I think it's a way of, I do goal matching. Like, my energy will match the goals that they have. So if they want to be competitive, I will train them to be competitive. If they want to just do skill development and be recreational and have fun, then my mentality and focus and intentionality will be on that aspect of just having fun and helping them develop skills. It won't be on the competitive side of things, because there is a very different mental perspective and approach when you're looking at things recreationally versus competitively. And so I think the goal aspect is like, I will invest more energy in the coaching and the training than the goals that they've identified, mostly just to protect my sanity. Because if I want them to be competitive and they don't want to, I think it creates a lot more dissonance in the team than it does any sort of harmony.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great point and great takeaway as well. Just the piece on shared goal setting. At the end of the day, as a coach, it's like, make sure your team sets those shared goals and there's that common understanding. And then essentially your approach to like practice planning, delivery, and coaching, should kind of mirror and reflect and align with that, rather than necessarily the reverse of being like, hey, the coach has, these goals now, just like, how can we like like plan a coach around that, right? So the shared goal setting amongst athletes and your players is a starting point to really drive your coaching. I think that's a really valuable takeaway and a really, really good point.
It definitely helps with accountability on the team as well, because I've noticed with the up and coming generations of volleyball that things tend to be taken more personally. And when for example, if someone is messing up in our serve receive line, I'll shift them out and they'll be like, well, why am I getting shifted out? I'm like, well, because you just costed us 2 points. So, but if you're all on the same page about being competitive, then you understand, like, I'm getting shifted out because I'm hurting the team more than I am helping the team. And so this is a way to help the team. Like, this is the best that I can do right now. And so I think it holds everybody accountable to the goals that they shared as a team, to where now it's very much, no, this is not about you. This is about us. And so it gets to the point where, like, if you are concerned about being shifted out on certain things or not playing what you want to play, then, essentially do better, like play better, be better, like be better than yesterday. And you'll get to that point. So like, I also like that the shared goal entails a shared accountability amongst the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of gets that buy-in from everybody. And I think having that, like you said, hopefully helps athletes better understand decisions that are made, by the coaches, and, hopefully creates buy-in with that, because again, it's the shared goal and they can kind of see why it's benefiting everybody. So yeah, I think that's also a very, very good point. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps things up. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insight. I know, again, the importance of incorporating new content and, progressiveness within your practice planning is important. And I think, you've shared some really valuable lessons that you've learned as a coach. And like you said, hopefully that helps others kind of maintain some sanity, if they're just getting started on their coaching journey. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Take care.